Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon, dear participants of today's event. So today we have an honor to hear from Dr. Vüsal Qasımlının about his new book, which is devoted to the growth theory. As you know, that developing economies like Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan have been seeing the way of rapid growth, and we economists always try to explain this growth and what are the factors of this growth. If we see the evolution of this growth theories, so it's been a very long time people try to understand how these growths are contributed and what are the main determinants of these growths. So economic growth theory itself went through different stages. So as we know that after World War II, people start to write the theories based on the Calder facts, or the Solo Swan introduced the economic growth models with the constant savings rates. And after some time, Cass-Cookman modified the model of endogenous savings and etc. So we can keep continuing and go, we can discuss many other theories. So today, this new book of Dr. Vüsal Qasımlının will explain the evolution of this growth theories and what are the modern time growth theories are explaining, the recent economic changes in developing and developed economies. So if our participants don't mind, Dr. Qasımlının, first we will give you the floor. So after the presentation of the book, then we will go to the Q&A session. Is it okay, Dr. Qasımlının?
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Obid Hakimov. Let me share my screen. Is it okay, Dr. Obid Hakimov?
That's perfect. That's perfect. We can see your screen.
Okay.
Please, other participants, please turn off your microphones, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hakimov. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude for your hospitality during our visit to international conference in Tashkent. And using this opportunity, I would like one more time to extend my gratitude for hosting a book presentation in your institute, which is a very important leading think tank, not only in Uzbekistan, but in Central Asia as well. And let me say that a couple of weeks ago, we introduced this book in Pakistan Institute of Development Economics. And next month, we have planned to introduce this book in the United States, Nevada University. Let me start my presentation. This is content of my presentation. And the first slide is about why states have different levels of income. There's no single answer to this question from Adam Smith to the present day. Maybe the reason is in Adam Smith's time, the per capita income of the richest and poorest countries differed only 4 times. But now the GDP per capita of the richest Monaco and the poorest Burundi differs 711 times. In other words, Madagascar GDP per capita, as you see here, is twice more than Burundi's, Nepal's than Madagascar, Ghana's than Nepal, Jordan's than Ghana, Cuba's than Jordan, Latvia's than Cuba, Japan's than Latvia, Switzerland's than Japan, and Monaco's than Switzerland. In 2019, per capita GDP in high-income countries was $44,000, even more than that. Upper middle-income countries, more than $9,000. Middle-income countries, more than $5,500. Low middle income countries more than $5,000, and low income countries only $800. Income gaps are growing not only among states, but also among people, companies, and genders. According to Oxfam, the wealth of the richest 1% of the world's population is twice the wealth of 6.9 billion people. My next slide is about happy families. This is a quotation from Leo Tolstoy, who wrote in Anna Karenina that all happy families are alike and each unhappy family is uniquely unhappy. This is same for economy as well. Introducing the classical approach to economic growth, Adam Smith and Ricardo identified three main factors of production: labor, capital, and land. Later, Romer and others added technology to this line. And a number of scientists, including Roderick, Robinson, Acemoglu, and others, added institutions. And finally, Hofstede, Huntington, and Engelhardt added culture as well. I tried to cover all these aspects, all these factors of economic growth in this very slide, and introduce this, by the way, infographics in my book as well. A long time ago, Ibn Khaldun, which is popular in Uzbekistan as well, accepted moral values in society as a basis of development. This book explains the essence of economic growth using various model approach, including the, as you mentioned, slow growth model, the neoclassical model, endogenous technological change, stochastic growth, so on. In addition to traditional factors affecting economic growth, the role of the factors was also touched upon, such as cultural diversity, narratives, and social capital in economic development. Jared Diamond considers geographical determination as the basis of economic development, and therefore points out that the first agricultural farming in the history of the world was located in the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, which has favorable natural conditions. My next slide is about growth diagnostics. Dr. Abid Hakimov, if you remember, we discussed this issue in your office in Tashkent as well. Nobel laureate Esther Duflo wrote in his The Economist as Plumber article that since economists support governments develop more and more new policies and regulations, they go into the details of public policy and thus provide a plumbing approach. When theoretical approach are not enough, the plumber knows what can work in the real world. Hausmann, Ricardo, and Velasco, in their growth diagnostics article, developed an analytical framework that formed a tool to identify binding constraints to growth in each country, and concluded that reforms might be successful if targeting binding constraints. Growth diagnostics approach is motivated by three considerations. First, while development is a broad concept entailing the raising of human capabilities in general, we believe increasing economic growth rates is the central challenge that developing nations face. Higher levels of living standards are the most direct route to achieving improvements in social and human indicators. Reform strategies should be principally targeted at raising rates of growth. Second, trying to come up with an identical growth strategy for all countries regardless of the circumstances, is unlikely to prove productive. Growth strategies are likely to differ according to domestic opportunities and constraints. And the last one, third, it is seldom helpful to provide governments with a long list of reforms, many of which may not be targeted at the most binding constraints on the economic growth. Governments face administrative and political limitations, and their policymaking capital is better deployed in elevating binding constraints than in going after too many targets all at once. So growth strategies require a sense of priorities. My next presentation slide is about problem-driven iterative adaptation or a leader-driven, solution-driven approach. My professor from Harvard University, Matt Andrews, and others like Lan Pritchett and Michael Woolcock have developed problem-driven iterative adaptation, a step-by-step approach which helps you break down your problems into the root cause, identify entry points, search for possible solutions, take action, reflect upon what you have learned, adapt, and then act again. By the way, your government accelerator approach is very looking like problem-driven iterative adaptation methodology developed by Harvard University. By the way, in case of Azerbaijan, we have own approach. We customize this PDIA approach in case of Azerbaijan in our circumstances. And as you know, we invited your delegation to visit to Baku, to Azerbaijan, and to discuss all these issues in Azerbaijan. It is a dynamic process with tight feedback loops that allows you to build your own solution to your problem that fits your local context. PDIA is a learning by doing approach. The PDIA approach rests on 4 principles. First of all, local solutions for local problems, pushing problem-driven positive deviance. Third one, try, learn, iterate, and adapt. And the last one, scale through diffusion. It is important to deconstruct the problems that hinders economic growth, that is, to break it down into details. It is possible to penetrate the problem with the Japanese 5 why questions or fish skeleton, as you see in my presentation methods. In this way, for example, Toyota was able to bring its production to an almost perfect level by finding and treating the root cause of the problems. Deliberation councils with the participation of government, business, and civil society representatives can shed light on problems in the value chain. By the way, in case of Uzbekistan, your deliberation council, in other words, government accelerator, covers all stakeholders as well. The experience of countries that have shown economic miracles in Asia proves the effectiveness of deliberation councils. In Japan, which has about 200 deliberation councils, there's even a council that solves the problems of sumo wrestling. In keeping with the spirit of stakeholder capitalism, discussions involving all stakeholders have the potential to accurately diagnose economic problems. My next slide is about AAA, which is very important after implementation of problem-driven iterative adaptation. By the way, let me say that solution and leader-driven approach is not appropriate for covering all binding constraints and pushing forward your economic growth. And that's why sometimes you can improve your international rankings according to very reputable reports. But on the other hand, you cannot grow in appropriate way, in duly way, like Argentina and other Latin American countries, so Mexico in last century, unsimilar to Chilean economic growth miracle. AAA, after identifying the problems of economic growth, the AAA, authority, acceptance, and ability approach can be applied to answer the question of where to start. First, it is important to have the authority to ensure economic growth. Then, all stakeholders must understand and accept problem, form a sense of ownership. Ownership is very important. And I know that from your experience, from Uzbek's experience, you can prove my idea on sense of ownership, which is very decisive in problem solving. And the third, the ability, your resources. So AAA, from that point of view, is very important. My next slide is about behavioral approach in growth. An economist must have both theoretical training and practical skills to make the right policy decisions. In the 1960s, it was thought that Standard Oil, the Communist Party, and the Catholic Church were the best planned and managed organizations. The future was as planned. Later, strategic management came to the fore. The modern world requires not only to plan at the macro level, but also to be flexible and agile in accordance with the requirements of the day and the challenge of the future. On the business level, McKinsey recommends even combining agile approach with lean management. By the way, 5 years ago, the President of Azerbaijan Republic, Mr. Ilham Aliyev, adopted strategic roadmaps of Azerbaijan, which laid foundation for strategic management in Azerbaijan. And in its turn, our Center for Analysis of Economic Reforms and Communication was tasked by Mr. President to run a monitoring and evaluation of strategic roadmaps and other state programs. By the way, in this case, on one hand, monitoring and evaluation, on other hand, reforms generation are being interrelated between each other, and such kind of interrelation between monitoring and evaluation and reforms generation is a how to say virtuous circle which pushes forward economic development. For the past 40 years, prominent figures in the behavioral economy, such as Daniel Kahneman, Robert Schiller, Richard Thaler, Angus Dayton, and others challenge the principle of rationality of individuals, which underlies classical theory. Behavioral economics emphasize the role of psychology in people's decision-making and economic behavior, as well as relationship between rational, perceptual, and emotional process. Some even believe that 70% of human decisions are emotional and 30% are rational. Gallup's research added a new color to economic growth. Behavioral economics play an important role in ensuring high growth and profitability. Thus, companies applying the principle of behavioral economics show 85% more sales growth and 25% more profit growth than their competitors. Gallup's research shows that behavioral economics has the potential to collect the low-hanging fruit rather than Six Sigma or lean management. Gallup teaches business leaders how to achieve real growth by understanding human nature. I can return to this behavioral approach, but now I would like to turn to next slide is about economic complexity of Uzbekistan. Economic complexity expresses the diversity and sophistication of the productive capabilities embedded in the exports of each country. The economic complexity index has been shown to explain income difference across countries and predict future growth better than any other single measure. By the way, this complexity index developed by Harvard University Growth Lab under leadership of Professor Hausman. Uzbekistan ranks as the 87th most complex country in the economic complexity index, as you see here. Compared to a decade prior, Uzbekistan's economy has become more complex, which is good, improving 4 positions in the economic complexity index ranking. Uzbekistan's improving complexity has been driven by diversifying its exports. Moving forward, Uzbekistan is positioned to take advantage of a moderate number of opportunities to diversify its production using its existing know-how. Research from the Growth Lab finds that countries whose exports are more complex than expected for their income level grow faster. Growth can therefore be driven by a process of diversifying know-how to produce a broader and increasingly more complex set of goods and services. Uzbekistan is a complex as expected for its income level. As a result, its economy is projected to grow moderately. The Growth Lab's 2029 growth projections foresee growth in Uzbekistan of 4.7%, as you see in this slide, annually over the coming decade, ranking in the top quartile of countries globally. Uzbekistan has not yet started the traditional process of structural transformation 5 years ago, but I know that today very high level of structural transformation in Uzbekistan's economy, and this structural transformation is a driver of economic growth in Uzbekistan, and that's why Uzbekistan is among top 3 countries that had not economic decline in last year in Europe and Central Asian region. And this is thanks to very fast and complex economic reforms in Uzbekistan. A key source of economic growth, this process reallocates economic activity from low to high productivity sectors. It broadly moves activities out of agriculture to into textiles, followed by electronics and machinery manufacturing. Global market share in textile exports in Uzbekistan has stagnated over the previous decade. Electronics and machinery have yet to take off, limiting its income growth. Economic growth is driven by diversification into new products that are incrementally more complex. Uzbekistan has added 38 new products since 2004, and these products contributed $10 in income per capita in 2019. It is very high level. By the way, during the last 4 and 5 years, Uzbekistan made a lot new products and developed its economic complexity ranking, which is very important. And in comparison with other countries in Central Asia, Uzbekistan has improved its complexity more and more. Uzbekistan has diversified into a sufficient number of new products, but at too small a volume to contribute to substantial economic growth. And I think after this pandemic, in post-pandemic period, Uzbekistan will have more opportunity to push forward economic growth. Even when I was expert consultant of Asian Development Bank 6 years ago, we developed special econometric model for Central Asian Caucasian countries. In case of implementation of economic reforms, we can double, triple economic growth in our region. And I see that Uzbekistan used this opportunity implementing new economic reforms to push forward economic growth. And next slide is about Uzbekistan's strategic bets approach. As you see here, we have 4 quadrants, and according to Harvard Growth Lab, Uzbekistan in strategic bets approach. And Uzbekistan's existing know-how affords a moderate amount of opportunity to diversify into related products. In diversifying its economy, Uzbekistan may consider, as you see here, strategic bets approach like Azerbaijan, Saudi Arabia, Chile, and other countries. Few nearby opportunities call for coordinated long jumps into strategic areas with future diversification potential. And last but not least, slide conclusion. And in fact, the problem of economic growth is unique in each country, as we mentioned, and the recipe for economic growth is therefore different. Former US President Ronald Reagan stated that there's no limit to growth because there's no limit to human intelligence, imagination, and wonder. If this were not the case, then the economic growth would not still be the main topic of discussion, even though the world economy, which was only 183 billion at the beginning of our era, is now over the 100 trillion US dollar. Imagine that in 1820, the world's GDP per capita was 1,100 US dollars. In 2018, this figure was more than 15 times higher, more than 15,000 US dollars. Economic growth were particularly rapid over the past 50 years. The pace of economic growth began to vary sharply across regions and countries. This book analyzes the nature of economic growth and the resulting inequality, as well as provides policy proposals. In 1990, per capita GDP in Latin America was more than a quarter of the US economy level, while per capita GDP in developing Asian economies was only 5% of corresponding US figure. From 1990 to 2019, Asian economies quadrupled, but Latin America still remained at the same level. The reason for this was that Asia had twice as much investment as Latin America. However, the countries of Central, Eastern, and Southeast Europe, which at that time attracted less investment than Asia, also developed faster than Latin America. The explanation for this fact was related to the quality of institutions and human capital. In general, the level of productivity of the economy is more important for economic growth. So this was my last presentation slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and it will be my pleasure to answer your questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Akimov. Thank you.